I was born into a name that people feared before they ever met me. My name is Ishaq al-Saud, and when this story began, I was 34 years old, a prince raised inside one of the most guarded families in Saudi Arabia. From the outside, my life looked perfect. Palaces of marble, servants who lowered their eyes when I passed, and a future already written for me before I learned how to write my own name. But privilege can become a prison when every breath you take belongs to tradition. My earliest memories are not of toys or laughter, but of recitation halls, where the air smelled of dust and oud perfume, while teachers corrected our pronunciation of the Quran with strict precision. I memorized verses before I understood emotions. I learned obedience before identity. My father often said, "A prince does not question. A prince represents Islam." Those words followed me like shadows. People assumed faith came easily to me because religion surrounded every moment of my life. Daily prayers announced through palace speakers, scholars visiting during dinners, conversations always ending with reminders of honor and submission. Yet inside me lived a quiet emptiness I never dared describe. I feared my own thoughts. Sometimes during prayer, while others wept passionately, I felt nothing except exhaustion from pretending. I wondered why God felt distant even when I followed every rule perfectly. But questioning was dangerous. Doubt was not seen as curiosity. It was seen as a rebellion. When I was 12, I asked the teacher why fear seemed stronger than love in our sermons. He struck the desk with a stick and said, "Our faith begins with fear." That day, I learned to bury questions deep where no one could hear them, not even myself. As I grew older, expectations multiplied. I married young to preserve family alliances. Cameras followed my charity appearances. Imams praised my devotion publicly, yet privately I felt like an actor rehearsing lines written by generations before me. At night, after ceremonies ended, silence became unbearable. I would sit alone on a balcony overlooking Riyadh's lights and ask God quietly, "Are you real to me or only real to everyone watching me?" I never received an answer, only more responsibilities. By the time Ramadan arrived that year, I was spiritually exhausted, though no one could see it. The holy month was supposed to renew faith, and when I convinced myself that deeper worship in Mecca would finally fix whatever was broken inside me, I believed if I prayed harder, fasted longer, and humbled myself more completely, peace would come. Before I continue, I want to ask something gently. If stories like this matter to you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share, because many people searching for truth are too afraid to speak, just like I once was. I share this not for attention, but because silence almost destroyed me. What happened during that Ramadan changed everything I believed about God, about religion, and about myself. Because in Mecca, during the holiest nights of my life, I witnessed something that shattered the world I thought was sacred forever. For most of my life, faith was measured by performance. I woke before dawn, washed carefully for prayer, and stood shoulder to shoulder with men who believed certainty was proof of righteousness. I memorized long passages of the Quran until my tongue moved automatically, yet my heart often felt like a silent observer trapped inside my own body. As a prince, devotion was expected to be visible. Cameras captured my presence at mosques, scholars praised my discipline, and relatives spoke proudly of my knowledge. But inside, questions gathered slowly, like desert sand, filling a room no one entered. I remember one evening years before Ramadan, when a respected cleric visited our palace. In public, he spoke about humility and sacrifice, warning against worldly temptation. Later that same night, I watched servants deliver expensive gifts to his private quarters, while laughter echoed behind closed doors. I told myself not to judge. I repeated the phrase I had learned since childhood: obedience protects faith. Still, something unsettled me. The older I became, the more I noticed the distance between sermons and behavior among powerful men who claimed spiritual authority. Marriage added another layer of expectation. My wife was kind, but raised with the same understanding, that honor mattered more than honesty. We performed religion together like partners, in a ceremony neither of us questioned aloud. During family gatherings, conversations revolved around reputation, alliances, and maintaining the image of devotion. I smiled when required, nodded when scholars spoke, and suppressed the growing feeling that I was disappearing behind roles assigned to me. When Ramadan approached that year, hope returned briefly. I convinced myself that my emptiness was a personal failure. I'm not a spiritual problem. I believed Mecca would heal me. The journey there always carried emotional weight. The white garments of Ihram, the sea of worshippers moving as one body, the sound of recitation filling the air like waves. Standing near the Kaaba, I felt awe, but beneath it lingered anxiety I could not explain. Everyone around me cried during prayers, raising their hands with desperation, while I searched for emotion that refused to come. I fasted strictly, avoided distractions, and extended my nightly prayers, whispering supplications until my throat felt dry. Instead of peace, however, a strange heaviness settled inside me. Sleep became restless. My thoughts grew louder. I began noticing small inconsistencies, the impatience of certain officials managing crowds, arguments hidden behind polite religious language, and the exhaustion on faces pretending spiritual joy. One night, after breaking my fast, I sat alone watching pilgrims circle the Kaaba endlessly, and a question rose again despite my fear. Why did holiness feel rehearsed instead of alive? I immediately asked forgiveness for even thinking it. Doubt felt like betrayal, yet suppressing it felt dishonest. The tension between truth and safety tightened around my chest, until breathing itself felt difficult. I realized I could no longer escape my thoughts through routine. If God was real, I wanted to know Him beyond obligation. If my faith was true, it should survive honest searching. That realization terrified me more than anything else. Late one evening, unable to sleep, I decided to return alone to the Grand Mosque after most crowds had faded. I told no gods, no family, no advisors. I wanted one night where I could speak to God without expectations, titles, or witnesses. I believed I was going there to strengthen my faith. I did not know I was walking toward the moment that would begin breaking it completely. The mosque at night felt different from the crowded holiness of daylight. The marble floors were cool beneath my feet, and the echo of distant recitation drifted through the vast space like a whisper carried by the wind. Only a few worshippers remained, scattered across the prayer hall, their quiet movements blending into the soft hum of devotion. I remember feeling relieved by the silence. For the first time in years, no one watched me. No one expected perfection. I stood facing the Kaaba and began to pray slowly, carefully forming each word, hoping sincerity would finally replace the emptiness inside me. Minutes passed, then hours. My knees ached, but I refused to stop. I kept repeating supplications I had memorized as a child, asking Allah to remove doubt from my heart. Still, peace did not come. Instead, an uneasy awareness crept over me, as if something unseen demanded my attention. I stepped away to walk along a quieter corridor near a restricted section usually reserved for mosque officials. The lights there were dimmer, and shadows stretched across the walls. As I turned a corner, voices reached me, low, hurried, not the tone of prayer, but of secrecy. I recognized one voice immediately. It belonged to an Imam widely respected, a man whose sermons were broadcast across the kingdom, whose words shaped how millions understood God. I paused instinctively, not intending to listen. But then I heard laughter followed by behavior that contradicted everything he publicly preached about purity and righteousness. I froze. My first reaction was denial. My mind searched for explanations, excuses, misunderstandings. Perhaps I was mistaken. Perhaps context would justify what I saw. But the longer I stood there, the clearer reality became. The sacred authority I had trusted since childhood suddenly felt fragile, almost theatrical. My chest tightened, and I stepped back quietly, afraid of being seen. Around me, Verses of the Quran continued echoing from distant speakers, creating a painful contrast between holy words and hidden actions. I returned to the prayer area, but nothing looked the same. The mosque felt larger, emptier, as though meaning itself had drained from the space. I tried to pray again, yet my thoughts refused obedience. If those who guided us lived differently in secret, what did that mean for everything I believed? Fear replaced devotion, not fear of God, but fear of truth. Questioning an imam was unthinkable, especially for someone in my position. Exposure of such hypocrisy could destroy reputations, families, even lives. I lowered my head, pretending to pray, while my heart raced uncontrollably. Memories flooded back, teachers insisting scholars were chosen guardians of truth, elders warning that doubt led only to destruction. I felt trapped between loyalty and honesty. Part of me wanted to forget what I had witnessed and return to comfortable certainty. Another part refused to lie to itself anymore. The conflict tore at me until tears formed without warning. I whispered quietly, "God, what am I supposed to do with this?" No answer came, only silence heavier than before. Worshippers nearby bowed peacefully, unaware that my world had begun collapsing beside them. I realized that faith built solely on authority could crumble the moment authority proved human. As dawn approached, exhaustion settled into my bones, but sleep felt impossible. One question repeated endlessly inside my mind, louder than every sermon I had ever heard. If the shepherd is false, what happens to the flock? After that night, something inside me refused to return to normal. I moved through Ramadan like a man pretending to recognize his own reflection. Every prayer felt mechanical, every verse familiar yet strangely hollow. I stood beside thousands of worshippers, bowing and rising in perfect unity, but internally I felt separated from all of them, as though an invisible wall had formed between my body and my belief. I tried to convince myself that what I had seen meant nothing, that human failure did not invalidate faith, yet the image followed me relentlessly. During suhoor meals with my family, conversations sounded distant, their laughter echoing while my thoughts replayed the moment again and again. I began sleeping less, afraid of silence because silence allowed questions to grow louder. Flashbacks from childhood surfaced unexpectedly. I remembered being 9 years old, asking why God seemed angry in so many lessons. My instructor's face hardened before he ordered me to repeat verses about punishment until I cried from exhaustion. "Questions invite shaitan," he warned. That memory returned now with painful clarity. Then when I realized how deeply fear had shaped my understanding of God, for the first time I wondered whether obedience built on fear could ever create real peace. One evening, unable to bear the pressure inside my mind, I locked myself in my private room and opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I typed words I never imagined searching. Who is Jesus in Christianity? I immediately felt guilt, as though unseen eyes watched me. I cleared the browser twice before forcing myself to continue. Articles appeared comparing beliefs, testimonies of converts, debates I had been taught to avoid. Some arguments angered me, others confused me, but a strange curiosity kept me reading. I expected hostility toward Islam, yet many testimonies spoke instead about love, forgiveness, and personal relationship with God. Then that idea unsettled me more than criticism ever could. Religion, as I knew it, was structure and submission, not relationship. Still, I closed the laptop repeatedly, whispering prayers for forgiveness after each search, terrified I was betraying everything my family represented. Days passed, and the internal tension became unbearable. During Taraweeh prayers, verses about judgment struck me differently, no longer inspiring devotion, but anxiety. I began wondering whether God truly desired fear or something deeper I had never experienced. One night, overwhelmed by exhaustion, I collapsed onto the floor beside my bed. For the first time in my life, I stopped reciting memorized supplications. Instead, I spoke honestly. "God," I whispered, my voice shaking. I don't know who you are anymore. If I am wrong, guide me. If I have been blind, I open my eyes. I don't care what it costs. I just want truth. The words terrified me the moment they left my mouth. Truth could destroy my family, my title, my entire life. Yet something inside me felt relieved, as though honesty itself was a form of worship. Tears came uncontrollably, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. I lay there staring into darkness, heart pounding, unsure whether I had just prayed sincerely for the first time or committed the greatest mistake of my life. Exhaustion eventually pulled me into sleep, while tears still rested on my face, unaware that the answer to my desperate prayer was already waiting beyond my dreams. Sleep did not come gently that night. It felt as if I fell through darkness rather than into rest. At first there was nothing, no sound, and no sensation, only silence deeper than anything I had known. Then light began to appear, soft and warm, not blinding but alive, like dawn rising without a sun. I became aware that I was standing in a vast open place, peaceful beyond explanation. The anxiety that had followed me for months was gone. Even before I saw him, I felt something I had never experienced in prayer before: complete safety. A figure approached slowly, dressed in white that seemed to carry its own glow. I could not fully describe his face, yet it felt familiar, as though my soul recognized him before my mind could understand. My first instinct was fear, but it faded instantly when he spoke my name. Ishaq. His voice was gentle, steady, filled with compassion rather than authority demanding submission. I fell to my knees without being told. I'm overwhelmed by emotion I could not control. He did not rebuke me. He did not accuse me of doubt. Instead, he said, "You are tired because you have been carrying what was never meant for you." Tears streamed down my face as peace surrounded me like warm air. I asked the question that had lived inside me for years. "Who are you?" He answered simply, "I am Jesus." The name echoed through me with unexpected familiarity. I had heard it many times in religious discussions, always distant, always debated, yet here it felt personal and undeniable. I expected judgment, but instead he extended his hand toward me. "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." The words carried weight beyond sound, entering directly into my heart. Every fear, every hidden question, every moment of emptiness seemed understood without explanation. And I wanted to speak more, to ask thousands of questions, but peace overwhelmed language itself. For the first time in my life, I felt loved without performance, accepted without proving devotion. The light around him grew brighter, and a sense of invitation filled the air. Not pressure, not command, only open welcome. Then suddenly I woke. My room was dark, the early call to prayer faint in the distance, yet my heart raced as if I had returned from another world. I sat upright, breathing heavily, unsure whether to call it a dream or something far more real. The peace remained, lingering in my chest, like warmth refusing to fade. Confusion quickly followed. Why would I dream of Jesus after praying for truth? Fear told me to forget it immediately, but curiosity refused to disappear. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. After several moments of hesitation, I downloaded a Bible application, constantly glancing toward the door as if someone might enter and discover me. I opened it randomly, unsure where to begin, and my eyes landed on familiar words I had heard moments before in the dream. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." My breath caught. I read the sentence again and again, trembling, realizing the voice I heard in my dream had spoken words written centuries before I was born. Sitting alone in the darkness, I felt both terrified and strangely alive, aware that something irreversible had begun inside me. The change inside me did not go unnoticed. At first, it was subtle. My eyes lingered on scripture instead of ceremonial duties. I hesitated before responding to Imam's rehearsed questions. My demeanor carried a weight they could not name. My wife noticed it first. She asked gently one evening, "Ishak, are you all right? You seem distant." I forced a smile, saying I was simply tired from the fast, but she persisted, worry flashing across her face. Soon, relatives began commenting on small things: my refusal to attend certain events, my quietness in prayer circles, the way I no longer recited memorized verses with the same mechanical perfection. They did not understand that my heart was no longer performing for them, that my mind had begun to live in questions instead of blind obedience. Private confrontations began next. One uncle, a man respected by family and religious scholars alike, cornered me in the palace gardens. His tone was calm, almost fatherly, but beneath it I felt the weight of threat. "Ishak, there are whispers. People speak of your behavior. Do not let vanity or confusion lead you astray. Remember who you are. Remember what is expected of you." I felt fear like a physical presence, tightening my chest. I wanted to reassure him, to retreat into the comfortable lie I had always told myself, but honesty now burned too brightly to ignore. "I am searching," I whispered, almost inaudibly. "I need truth, even if it frightens me." He shook his head slowly, a mixture of sorrow and disappointment in his eyes. "You are walking dangerous paths. Remember your place." Days later, an Imam I had trusted visited me privately. His words were less threatening, but sharper in a different way. "You risk more than you understand. Family, honor, even your position. There are consequences to wandering from the path we have chosen for you." I nodded, silent. My mind a storm. Fear pressed against the small flicker of courage growing inside me. I felt the weight of every expectation, every tradition, every lifetime of obedience threatening to crush the fragile truth forming in my heart. I returned to my room that night, closing the door carefully, and whispered to God in the only way I could, "Jesus, if you are real, give me courage. Show me how to stand in you, even if everything I know is lost." My hands shook as I gripped the edges of my prayer mat, my forehead pressed against the floor. I thought of the dream, the figure in white, the words of rest that had penetrated fear itself. I felt the truth of them now, alive and demanding, yet terrifying. I knew I had a choice: silence and safety, or honesty and risk. Fear whispered to me, "Keep quiet, obey, survive, preserve appearances." But the presence I had met in my dream seemed to press against me, reminding me that safety built on lies was no salvation at all. In that quiet, I realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but standing despite it. I did not yet know what the world would demand, but I whispered again, trembling, "Jesus, I choose you. Teach me how to walk in you. Give me courage for what comes next." My chest ached with anticipation and dread, the first real step toward a life I had never imagined taking, already beginning in the small, trembling whisper of my soul. The moment I confessed my belief to even one trusted family member, the world around me shifted violently. I had rehearsed words in secret, trembling with every thought of their reaction, and yet, when I spoke them aloud, the air seemed to crack. My cousin, someone I had grown up with, looked at me as though I had become a stranger overnight. "Ishak, what are you saying?" he asked, his voice low but tense. I swallowed hard and said simply, "I believe in Jesus." The words hung between us like a live wire. He recoiled slightly, anger flashing behind the confusion in his eyes. "Do you understand what this means? Your father, your family, everyone. This is not just foolishness, it's betrayal." I wanted to explain, to tell him about the dream, about the peace that had entered my heart, about the emptiness I had carried for decades. But fear had already taken hold. I realized then that belief was no longer private. Words spread like wildfire, carried in whispers through the palace corridors, reaching ears I never imagined. I was called into meetings with elders, religious advisors, and imams, and they did not raise their voices, but every word carried weight meant to crush me. "You are straying from the path of your forefathers," they said. "Do you value shame more than your soul?" I felt the pressure building around me, walls closing in, cameras, eyes, expectations, fear for my life and my future. Even my wife avoided direct questions, her gaze filled with worry and silent judgment. Yet in the midst of this, I discovered something miraculous. When I knelt alone at night, praying to the Jesus I had seen in my dream, a peace that no authority could touch filled me. I felt courage growing quietly but powerfully inside. I connected secretly with an online Christian community, faces on screens, voices from distant lands, encouraging me, sharing scripture, praying with me, reminding me that I was not alone. And that unseen fellowship became my lifeline. Every night I whispered, "Lord, help me stand firm. Help me follow you even if I lose everything." The cost of following Christ was becoming real. Invitations disappeared, relatives avoided me, and security subtly increased around me as if to remind me that the family did not forgive such deviation. I knew I would never again walk unnoticed. The world I had known, titles, privileges, appearances, was slipping away. Yet fear did not dominate. In prayer, I felt something stronger than lineage, stronger than expectation, an unshakable calm, a conviction that truth was worth every loss. Finally, I understood that safety built on compromise was no safety at all. One evening, after a particularly tense confrontation with an uncle who warned me of disgrace and ruin, I made a decision I had been avoiding for weeks. I would leave Saudi Arabia. I would step into the unknown, abandoning comfort, titles, and family expectations, but I would walk toward the God who had called my name, toward the life that had begun to awaken in me. That night, as I packed my few belongings in secret, I whispered to Jesus again, "Lead me, because I cannot follow anyone else. Give me strength for the road ahead." And for the first time, despite the fear, I felt the exhilaration of freedom mingled with surrender, a strange, terrifying, beautiful relief I had never known. The morning I faced the Imam and my family elder, I felt a tension in my chest that no ceremony or title could mask. The room was quiet, sunlight spilling across the marble floors, but every glance felt like a test. Every step I took weighed with centuries of expectation. The elder's eyes studied me, heavy with authority and disappointment. "Ishaq," he began, his voice calm but precise, "we have heard troubling reports. You are abandoning your duties, your faith, your family. Tell us this is not true." I took a deep breath, feeling my heart hammer in my chest. "It is true," I said simply. Silence hung like a shroud. The Imam stepped closer, the air thick with the invisible weight of accusation. "Do you understand the consequences of such rebellion? You jeopardize everything your lineage has built. You put your soul, your honor, even your life at risk." I nodded slowly, but I felt no fear now, not in the way I once had. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, as if the presence I had met in my dream pressed close, steadying me. "I understand," I whispered. But I cannot return to fear as faith. I cannot worship rituals that do not reach my heart. I have encountered truth, and I must follow it." The Imam's face tightened, anger and sorrow mingling, but I held my gaze. "And what truth is that?" he asked sharply. "Love," I said, my voice firm, trembling only with the weight of honesty. "The God I have met does not demand fear to be obeyed. He calls me by name. He meets me where I am. That is the God I will serve." My family elder's jaw tightened, but I could see doubt flicker in his eyes, a hint of something unspoken that my words had stirred. I knew this confrontation was more than a verbal exchange. It was the final battle between who I had been and who I had become. I felt the chains of expectation and fear break silently inside me, replaced by clarity. Every lesson I had been forced to memorize, every punishment for curiosity, every whispered warning of disgrace, none of it could touch the truth I had found. My heart, trembling yet alive, whispered to the presence I had met in my dream, Thank you. I stepped back, feeling the weight of their gaze, yet free in a way I had never known. Walking away from that room, from the titles, the privileges, the comforts that had defined me for decades, I realized I had lost everything, and yet gained everything that truly mattered. The path ahead was uncertain. The world outside was unknown, dangerous even. Yet for the first time, I knew I would not walk it alone. The peace, the love, and the presence of Christ that had entered my life in whispers and dreams would guide me. As I left the palace, I'm carrying nothing but a small bag and a heart full of faith. I looked back once, not with regret, but with resolve. I did not know what awaited me, but I knew who awaited me, and that certainty, more than anything else, filled me with strength, hope, and the freedom I had been searching for all my life. I arrived in a foreign city with nothing but the clothes I carried and a heart that felt both terrified and alive. The streets were unfamiliar, the language slightly different, and the anonymity was strange yet liberating. For the first time, I could breathe without performing, without pretending devotion, without feeling the crushing weight of expectation pressing on my chest. I found a small Christian fellowship online and quietly joined their gatherings, their voices and prayers gentle yet affirming. I like a balm for wounds I had carried for decades. They did not demand titles, rank, or lineage. They did not measure faith by memorization or ritual. Instead, they encouraged honesty, compassion, and seeking God with an open heart. Sitting among strangers who were already family in Christ, I felt a warmth I had never known. Tears came freely, unashamed, as I shared pieces of my story I had hidden from the world. Prayer became a dialogue, not a performance. Scripture became nourishment, not obligation. I felt the presence of Jesus in a way that was real and intimate, healing the fear and emptiness that had haunted me since childhood. I baptized myself quietly in the shower one morning, feeling symbolically and spiritually washed, reborn into a life of truth and freedom. Memories of the palace, the imams, the endless scrutiny, and the suffocating expectations faded slightly as I realized that God's love was bigger than all that I had lost. I still felt sorrow for those I left behind, for the family members trapped in fear-based obedience, for the friends I would never see again. But I did not feel bitterness or revenge. I felt compassion and a longing for them to experience the same peace I had found. Every night I whispered prayers for them, for the ones still hiding doubt, for the ones still bowing under invisible chains. I began to write letters and journal my journey, knowing that someday someone might read them and find courage. I shared online testimonies cautiously, hoping that those who were searching would see that God meets seekers in ways that surpass fear. I learned that spiritual rebirth does not erase pain or loss. It transforms them into witnesses of hope. Freedom is not the absence of consequence, but the presence of Christ, guiding, comforting, and strengthening the heart. Now, living quietly, praying openly, and serving in small ways, I finally understand what it means to follow God with everything I am. My title, my wealth, my past recognition, they no longer define me. My identity is rooted in love, truth, and the one who called me by name when no one else could. To anyone listening, struggling with fear, doubt, or the weight of expectation, truth exists beyond performance. Peace exists beyond tradition. Love exists beyond fear. I stand here today not as a prince of a palace, but as a child of God, free, whole, and alive. And I know with certainty that spiritual rebirth begins the moment we choose honesty, courage, and the God who waits patiently for our hearts to return to Him.